we're going to be showing you how to remove these Bomber 58s and slap the new ones in, which these are our Floxa forks that they sent me. Thank you so much to our Floxa for these forks. I can't wait to try them on and see how they ride. And yeah, let's get into it. Alright guys, so these are all the items and tools that we use to put on our Floxa forks. First of all, we got a microfiber. This is optional if you're trying to get your hands greasy or not. You also have napkins to clean off the excess. And we have gloves so your hands won't get dirty and greasy. We also have Maxima waterproof grease, which is the best grease that you can buy. And you also have anti-seize. So the anti-seize, you're gonna use that for your stem lock for the Warp 9. You also need a 3/8 wrench, and you also need a electric 3/8 wrench. This is optional. You also need a really small flathead for the brake line holder because they're really small. And for the axle, you're gonna need a 8mm to tighten it up, and a 5mm for your pinch bolts. If you have a number plate or not, you're gonna need one of these. If you do, zip ties and zip tie cutters, and you also use Loctite for your bolts. This is also optional to cut your stem if you have a stem mount or not, but I do, so I had to cut mine so it's perfect size. If you have a stock mount, then you're good. Alright, for the first thing that you need to do to remove these forks out of the way, you first need a 5mm to remove all these pinch bolts. Also remove the right side. Don't remove them all the way, just to the point where they come loose. And then you can just loosen up your axle. Alright guys, so make sure you don't do what I just did. I just dropped my bike. Make sure when you take off the axle bolt, make sure you hold your bike and then take it out. Alright guys, now that you got your wheel off, we would want to take off the number plate if you have one. If you don't, that's fine. But I would just take it off first, so then you have access to all the wires and get the rest of the things off out of the way. Let's see. Alright guys, so now we're going to remove these 4 bolts out of the stem mount if you have one. If you have a stock one, you're going to have to remove the pinch bolts out of the way, like the stock tube. Pull that thing out and then your bar just slides right out. Now that you get it off, you're going to have to loosen up these pinch bolts on the forks. We're going to do the top one first, right here. And then we're going to move down to the pinch bolts that go to the fork. And then we're going to remove this stem lock out of the way. And then put the new forks in. Now you can just remove this stem lock out of the way and get it off. Now that you got your bars out of the way, you're going to want to remove these 7 pinch bolts, the ones from the front and the ones in the back. There. Now that you got the bars and everything loosened up, you're gonna want to remove the brake line components. You're gonna want to remove this little hook that goes into your brake line. Take this thing fully out, and then from there you can move the caliper out of the way. Now that you got everything out of the fork, you're gonna want to pull these things down. Slide them out like that, and they're out. Alright guys, so now that you guys got the front end off, you're gonna want to clean the inside of the headset and put some fresh grease on this thing, because you always want to have fresh bearings with fresh grease. Alright guys, so I recommend putting on some gloves for the grease. I recommend getting the Maxima waterproof grease. This is one of my all-time favorite, and it gets the job done. Now you're just gonna want to put a little bit in the headset. Make sure it's all around. This is why I recommend putting on gloves, because it gets really messy. So we're gonna get some more grease over here, just a little bit. Put some more on the top, not too much, because we're gonna put more grease on the bearing than the headset. So we're just gonna put a little bit to the point where it gets nice. So as much as this could get, that's enough. Now you could get to slapping these on, and for this we're gonna want to remove these drop crowns and put those in first into the bike, then the forks. I want these to come out smoothly. Since I'm getting new forks on the bike, I would recommend getting a new bearing for the drop crown. Alright guys, so now we got all the bearings greased up. You're gonna want to grease up the bottom headset just a little bit. Now, since you got this bearing all greased up, we're gonna slide this one right into the headset. Nice and greased up. Now you're gonna put the pieces that go into the fork back on here. Make sure it's nice and maneuverable. Now that you got everything greased up in the headset and all the bearings dialed up, you're gonna want to slide these things through. Now that we slid the bottom triple clamp, you're gonna want to clean off all the grease residue out of the way. Hold this. Alright guys, so on my Surron, I have a direct stand mount, so this is gonna stick up a little bit. But if you have the stock Surron stand mount or mount, you could run it and you'll be fine. But for my preference, I would cut it so it looks way better. Dang, that's what I need. Now that I got my bottom clamp all cut, we're gonna put the spacer in here, and then we're gonna put the warp 9 stem lock. Alright, now that we got the triple clamps on and the warp 9 stem lock, we already got it a little tightened up. This is not how much we're gonna have it, but we're gonna slide the bars through in first, so then we could put the fork in. Slide the fork up. Make sure you have now that you got your bump stops, you're gonna slide this fork up just like that. Now we're gonna want to tighten these up a little bit so then the fork doesn't fall down. Alright, same thing. We're gonna slide this fork up to the clamps like the same thing on the other side. Now that we got both of the forks in, we're gonna tighten up just a little bit so it doesn't fall. Now we're gonna move up to the bars and put the bars in. Alright, now that I tightened up my bars and my headset stem lock, we're gonna move down into the forks and tighten up every pinch bolt that goes into the triple clamps. And what is pretty cool is that there's also 3 pinch bolts on these forks, and there's 2 on top, which is pretty cool. Never seen that before. So that was the first thing that I liked about these forks. And film this one. And they look clean. Now we're gonna get the wheel on the fork. We're obviously gonna grease the axle. Make sure it's all nice and greased. Now that we got the axle through the wheel, you're gonna want to tighten up the pinch bolts on both sides. So there's 4 bolts, 1 on the left side and then there's 1 on the right side. Something I didn't really like about the forks are this thing right here that holds your brake line. It has a little flat head that it's so hard to turn. It should have been like at least a 3mm on there, but it's whatever. That's one thing they should upgrade as well. Alright guys, so if you guys have a stock rotor on these forks, this is meant for a 203mm rotor. So I have a 220, so I'm gonna add this warp 9 spacer in so then it fits correctly. Make sure when doing this and tightening up your caliper bolt, you're gonna want to hold the brake and then tighten up the caliper bolts. Now that we got the forks on, these R Floxes are on the bike right now, and we're gonna see how these things handle on some jumps, see how they handle through ruts, and yeah, we're gonna just test these out and see how they ride. Alright guys, so the forks I got on my R Floxes were the 45-pound spring. You could also get a different type of pound spring on these forks. There's also a 203mm travel fork, and there's a 228mm travel. The one I got on my fork were the 45-pound spring and the 203mm travel. Alright, so there is a spring preload. This is for your weight. You could tighten up your fork and stiffen them up. There's also another option where it's a rebound right here, so this is what makes your fork go up and down as fast or as slow as you want to. So there's different type of size forks for these Surron. So the one I got from our Floxa were the 45-pound spring and the 203mm travel, and I got the one with no drop crown. You could also get the drop crowns on these forks. There's also another option where it's a 45 to 60-pound spring, and there's a 228mm travel one. So you could get different type of size forks, and the 228mm travel fork is definitely a taller fork that you could get. Now that we come down here to the fork, there's also another option that is the high-speed compression, and this is the same thing as the preload as up here, which you could tighten it up and make it feel harder or softer, and you could adjust these options and see how you like your riding better. Alright guys, so now you come down to the triple clamps. These are a little different than other type of forks. These come with 3 pinch bolts, and the top comes with 2, which is also pretty cool. Alright y'all, so these forks are really good. They feel way better than the Bombers and all the forks. I think these are really good forks for the price, and I think it's a budget price fork, and I would definitely buy it if I were you. These forks really handle really good. I like how whenever you land, you don't really bottom out. It just depends on your weight. I'm pretty lightweight, so it handles pretty good on me. Yeah, I love these forks. They're pretty good.